let's talk about a couple other modes of complex inheritance that violate Mendel's. So the first one we have is this idea of anticipation. So as this trait is passed on from generation to generation, so as it goes on, it gets more severe for earlier age of onset, okay? So if we're talking about a disease, let's say purple, okay? Let's say we're talking about a disease with purple polka dots, all right? So we're looking at a family. Okay, so here this guy might have one purple polka dot, one PD. This one's going to have five. This one here. They're going to have five. This one might have 10. Okay, so as it goes down, it gets more and more severe, or it can have an earlier age of onset. Here, he might not got his one polka dot till he was 50. She might get it at 35. This one might get it at 5. Okay, so with each generation, either a more severe phenotype or earlier age of onset. How is this possible? So this is possible by trinucleotide repeats. So 3 nucleotides that repeat over and over again. And it differs in the sequence of the nucleotides and the location within a gene depending on what disease we're talking about. So for example, this myotonic dystrophy is CTG, shows up in the 3' untranslated region, and you just have CTG over and over and over and over and over again. So we also know that with each generation, the length of repeats increases. So as the length of repeats increases, the age of onset gets younger and younger, and or the severity of the disease increases. Okay? So we see this correlation between the two. How do you get them? So this repeat expansion, we'll talk about this when we talk about mutations too, which comes like at the end of the semester. This can occur during replication. So we can have DNA polymerase chugging along, and then it gets lost because it's like, I just did this, and it can start putting in more. There can be some slippage that causes an insertion, okay? But something can happen during replication that causes these repeats to increase in length. And as they increase in length, we're going to have this disease or trait showing up earlier in our families or more severe. Okay, so here's another pedigree. Now we're looking at the age of onset O and the number of repeats R. Okay, so this woman first showed the disease at 34. Okay, doesn't seem to be too bad, right? Her children were also in their 30s to 40s. But her grandchildren now, 18, 9. Okay, so from 30 to 9. So as the generations went on, the age of onset got lower and lower. This person had 50 repeats. Their child, 82. This person has 49. Their kids are at 50. He had 61. 33, or no repeats here. 61 to 75. Okay. So age of onset goes down, number of repeats goes up, severity goes up. Are we okay with anticipation? Now we have this idea of polygenic and multifactorial, okay? Polygenic, many genes. So here we're talking many genes, one trait, okay? Multifactorial, many factors. And in this case, the factors are usually genes and environment, okay? So polygenic, many genes. So now we're looking at genes that exist on chromosomes 3, 5, and 8. All contribute to one phenotype. Pop quiz. What are chromosomes 1 through 22 called? Do you remember? I am so hoping that you said autosomes and so hoping that you didn't remember the word in the chapter and then forget about it. So polygenic inheritance has this additive effect. So the amount of dominant and recessive alleles plays a role. So in this case, a skin color, the more dominant alleles you have, the darker complexion you will be. The more recessive, the lighter. So here's our continuum, okay? It's also important to note when we're talking about polygenic that it's continuous versus discontinuous. So in discontinuous, you have this either or, okay? So when we talk about something being dominant or recessive, it's either short or it's tall, okay? It's either light or it's dark. Either or, it's curly or it's straight. But if it's continuous, then you have your two extremes, but anything is possible in the middle. Okay, so if we go back, some of the examples are skin color, eye color, hair color. These aren't things that just exist in two traits or binary like Mendel study. This is, you have your extreme and then there's a bunch in the middle, okay? This continuous variation. Also, interesting fact, these two girls are twins, okay? Real life twins. How'd that happen? Skin color is a polygenic trait. So if we look at our spectrum again, if they have parents that have a mix, then anything is possible in their kids, okay? And this shows you your continuum. So it's not either you're this color or that color. You have one side, the other side, and then anything in the middle is possible, okay? And then multifactorial traits, many factors. So these tend to be polygenic and have an environmental control. So if you hear someone say, hey, I'm predisposed to something, so that means I have the genes for this. Now, what happens in my environment can dictate if I show it or not. So weight and obesity, you can have so-called fat genes, right? But if you work out, eat right, you won't reach your full weight potential. You can have genes for intelligence, but if it's not cultivated, you won't reach your full intelligent potential. Diabetes can run in your family, but if you regulate your diet and you exercise, you don't have to have diabetes, okay? So you can have a genetic predisposition, but your environment dictates if you actually get the phenotype or not. So what's the difference between polygenic and pleiotropy? Pleiotropy was shown in the previous video. So polygenic, you should answer automatically because we just talked about it, right? So many genes, one trait. So what's pleiotropy? One gene, many traits, okay? So try to not confuse the two. Many genes, one trait, one gene, many traits. All right, questions, comments, concerns? If not, let's go on to one last idea. So that's it for all the non-Mendelian inheritance. But just one more idea. This idea of nature versus nurture, okay? So when we talk about nature, what are we talking about? We're talking about your DNA, your genetic makeup, okay? And how much of your physical makeup do you think is controlled by nature? Think about it, and we can talk about this in class. And now, what does nurture mean? Okay? So nurture, now we're talking about your environment. And how much of your physical makeup do you think is controlled by that? So you should be able to give me, is it 50-50? Is it 80-20? Is it 20-80? Is it 30-70? What do you think it is? And now in human genetics, what determines the rules that a gene will adhere to? So we went over a plethora of non-Mendelian. We went over some Mendelian. How does a gene know which rules it's going to play by? The answer is it lies in the gene. Each gene knows how its expression is controlled, okay? Each individual gene. And that wraps up non-Mendelian inheritance.